Hey everyone, it's Eric with FirearmTutorials.com. I got a request to talk a little bit about a Mark 23. Um, a user had seen some of my other HK stuff and had asked about the Mark 23 and just to go over some of the ins and outs of the gun. I'm not going to go over too many of the features or anything like that because they're covered in a lot of videos and the specs and history of the gun, but I'll show some things about the gun that may be useful to new owners of this or potential owners of a Mark 23. So just some parts on it that will show wear, some things that are a little different if you're used to the USP. So let's get started. The first thing, obviously, it's a pretty big gun. Everybody knows that. If you have larger hands, you'll have a pretty good time shooting this. I have pretty large hands, and this is one of the few guns where I can really wrap my hands around it and not feel like there's not enough room for them. So it's good for that. It does a really good job of taming recoil for being a 45 ACP. Between the USP and the Mark 23, the USP has just a little bit more recoil. So I think due to the larger slide and the longer barrel, the Mark 23 does just a slightly better job of handling the recoil. One of the things I don't like about this gun is the decocker on it. It can only be used by a right-handed person, which that's one of those things you deal with being left-handed, but it's not the easiest thing in the world to use, and without gloves on, it's got a pretty sharp feedback, and these ridges on here will hurt your fingers a little bit if you have softer skin on your thumb, so something to be aware of. And I don't really see how this could be done quote-unquote silently. I mean, even if you try just ever so slightly, it's still going to make a noise. But like I said, it's a little bit easier to manipulate with gloves, and I think that this gun was designed to be used with gloves because you see how big the trigger guard is. I mean, I could fit 3, maybe 4 of my fingers in the trigger guard there. The action's a little different on this versus the USP, so obviously you have single action, but when you decock it, it goes all the way to decocked, which on the USP you get kind of what's called half cocked, where you cock it and you see the hammer is not all the way forward. Now if you dry fire it, you see it goes all the way forward. So it's a little different on the Mark 23. You're not going to get that. There's just single action or double action. There's no half cocked, which is not a big deal. It's just different. Makes the double action pull though very hard. There's no take up at all with this trigger versus the USP. If you have it, see you've got some take up there. Not a bad thing in my opinion. It's just different. I do like the trigger on this better than the USP in one instance, but not necessarily the other. So while this is a match trigger, it's not the same match trigger that's in the USP. So you'll get a slight variation in trigger pull. It feels a little different and it's heavier, but I actually like the trigger is actually wider in the Mark 23, and it's got some ridges on it. I don't know if you can see those. Yeah, you can see them a little bit here. So it's got some ridges on it versus the USP has got some, it's just a pretty smooth trigger. Magazines are different. You can use the Mark 23 magazine in the USP. You can't use the USP magazine in the Mark 23 unless, in this rare instance, I've actually modified this magazine. You see it's got a little lip here, so I basically just took a little bit of material off the USP mag and then it fits. But generally speaking, that floor plate will prevent the magazine from sinking. Going through the breakdown of it, it's very similar to the USP, since this is kind of where the USP got its roots from. One of the things that you'll notice immediately, I'm talking, you put one magazine through this gun and you're going to get this wear on the bottom of the barrel here. That's completely normal, but what that comes from is this oversized spring that just rubs a little bit on the bottom of the barrel as the weapon cycles, but that's completely normal. Other areas you'll notice that show wear right here in the corners. You've got these here, not so much on this side, but right here that'll show some wear. And that's pretty much it. The barrel hood will show wear just like the USP will. And that's pretty much it. The finish on this barrel is a little bit different than the USP. It looks to have like a little bit more texturized finish. And then the slide is a little different too. The slide's got a little bit different finish depending on the date code. The Mark 23, some of them had the maritime, the older ones had a maritime finish, which was more of a shinier, like a piano finish type, and then this is kind of like a, more like a powder coated finish than the more satin-like finish that you find on the USP. But obviously breakdown is the same. This has got an O-ring at the end, just like the USP. What else? The internals are a little different. Some things are the same, but working on this is different than the USP. I will say the only issues I've had with this gun, and I've probably got about 3,000 rounds through it. The only issue I've had two issues. One, I had a fail to feed with some, what were they, Remington Golden Saber hollow points plus Ps. Just for whatever reason, I don't know if it was a defect with the bullet or whatever, but it didn't feed all the way in there. So other than that, it's been flawless for 3,000 rounds. 3,000 or so. The only other issue, actually I had two issues with the hammer. So you'll see the hammer is a little bit different. It's a little wider than the USP. And if you're going to thumb cock it like this, I did that a lot when I first got the gun. And I don't know if I just had a defective hammer or if the same thing would happen to this. But basically as I pulled it back, this hammer is two pieces. This part is metal, obviously, that hits the firing pin, and then the back of this is rubber, and HK did that so that you could drop the gun right on the hammer without it breaking or having any other ill effects. So like I said, I had the hammer start separating, and it actually started causing some malfunctions because the rubber part would get kinked up and then it wouldn't go all the way in there and hit the firing pin. So I called HK and they offered to replace it for free. I elected to just have them send me the hammer, and then I swapped it out myself so I didn't have to pay the overnight shipping to get it there. So that worked out. The second problem I had, which was also hammer related, I'll see if I can capture this on video. I don't know where my other light is. But down in here there is what's called a trigger rebound spring. I can't get a good shot of it with this lighting. There's a little, it's got a little arm in there. You may be able to see it depending on your monitor settings, but anyways, it basically ended up breaking. Part of it broke, and once that happened, it was a random thing where the hammer wouldn't reset correctly, and then I had to just kind of do a tap rack bang to get it to fire again. So I just got that piece, was like an $8 part, and put it in, and then it's been good as new. So as far as that goes, I will chalk that up to excessive dry firing. I used to dry fire the hell out of this gun because it was so expensive to shoot with the cost of ammo. And I really didn't shoot it much until I got a suppressor, and then obviously I was using this as my main suppressor host. So that's pretty much it. As far as the other differences, you can't put this gun on safe unless the hammer is cocked. Decocking it, you can't do that either. It has to go on fire and then you can decock it. You can't engage the safety unless it's cocked, which is different on the USP. I can engage the safety or decock it no matter what. And I actually like that better. But, you know, they're two great guns. I actually prefer the Mark 23 better. You know, I guess for $1,000 more, it's not that much better. You know, if you can only afford one of them, I would say buy the USP and take the other $1,000 and put it towards a suppressor or some ammo. But it's still one of my favorite guns and probably my favorite .45 pistol to shoot. So that's it, guys. If you have any questions or anything else that you want to know, ask, and thanks for watching.